we'll have to move on to the next presentation. It's uh, Julianne Attai.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So I'll just start sharing my screen. Okay, can everyone see this?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So hi, my name is Julianne Attai. I'm an NSI 2T3, and I'm very excited to share with you my summer research, which has been on effective remote teamwork. So for a bit of background, the coronavirus and the rise of social distancing has forced many university courses online, and this has posed a big challenges, particularly with the remote teamwork and design courses. And many students reported that they didn't feel very well supported and guided in this online transition. And this is a quote from one of the students that we gathered from our survey that we sent out to the engineering undergraduate student body at U of T on their online transition with teamwork. And this student said, a lot of the narrative in terms of teamwork and design courses I've been in has been focused around meeting in person is good, remote communication is bad and ineffective. There's a lot of guidance around how to work well in person, but very little that I've seen about how to work well remotely, because in the past, working in person was possible and all the guidance was do it in person, it's better. And so that's where our research comes in. We've spent the summer investigating different factors that impact remote teams and identifying some of the challenges that emerge in this kind of work. We're currently assembling a handbook which will guide students and instructors in engaging in effective remote teamwork. And we've chosen to scope our research to the first year experience, since that's where we found was the biggest research gap. There's a lot of studies on global virtual teams in industry and even some cross-country capstone projects, but very little on the remote first year experience. However, our findings are broad enough to apply to other remote teamwork and collaborative learning experiences, so it should be extremely informative to the entire student body. So our research team defines an effective team as being able to understand and build on each other's ideas, communicate effectively, and resolve conflicts. And so this was the framework that founded our understanding of what it means to be effective as a team. Below in the table are 12 behaviors that are subcategorized under organizational, relational, and communication, and we felt that this captured the fundamental components of what it means to be an effective team. So looking at our research process, we first wanted to start out with a broad literature review to identify any sort of things that could influence someone's remote teamwork experience. So we read a lot of case studies on global virtual teams, and we also read a lot of literature on psychological safety and identity to understand how these things develop in a team. We also did some stakeholder engagement. So we interviewed some faculty members on their transition online, and we also sent out a survey to the students in engineering at U of T on their experience in transitioning online on team-based projects. And from these different sources of information, we noticed certain points of contention and patterns kept emerging in students' remote teamwork experience. So we continued to research these factors to understand how and why they impact teamwork and compile recommended best practices, which are going to be going into our handbook. So one of the things we wanted to do in looking at the survey data was to understand the effect of remoteness on teamwork. And one of the interesting patterns that emerged is that students who reported a positive team transition commented a lot about the emotional commitment to either the project or the people on their team, and there was an explicit sense of trust with their team members that they would trust them to get the job done. However, students who had a negative team experience tended to vent about a lack of accountability, frustration in communicating online, a lack of motivation, and difficulty in coordinating logistics. So things like bad internet, time zones, and schedules. And there's a perceived greater need for compromise and understanding online, which students found extremely difficult, especially given all the other circumstances. So going back to our framework, we understand that effective communication and organization behaviors are mediated through relational behaviors. And this basically means that good relationships with team members promote good communication and good organizational behaviors, and vice versa. And it's important to be mindful of the context and structures that are set in place, because this influences how we engage in teamwork and demonstrate these behaviors. And this is a quote that came from our survey that I think captures this idea very well. The student said, "The fact that we started out in person is important because we built our team dynamic around that. In my summer courses where we started and ended things online, things went much smoother. So this captured one of the main struggles students faced with the rapid transition. A lot of teams who had previously worked online, such as commuter teams, generally had a smoother transition due to all the preset infrastructure in place. Two of the best examples from our survey that illustrates the importance of centering your behaviors around the affordances of the communication and work mediums available are the following. So this first quote came from a student who didn't have a great team transition and felt like they lost a lot of team morale because they could no longer get late night pizza or after meeting coffees, which is part of what they enjoyed of doing, certain rituals that they enjoyed doing with their team. And these activities that promoted bonding and relational behaviors did not translate well online, which led to a lack of team morale going into the transition. This student, on the other hand, had a better transition, and they shared with us one of the traditions they created online, which was having a meal together on a phone call. And the student said it was something nice to look forward to and a break from the isolation. And so this team adapted their way of engaging in relational behaviors in the online setting, which led to a better team experience and response. So in looking at how you can build up and progress team trust to that point online, we feel that there needs to be organization and communication behaviors demonstrated in order to create a surface level of trust, which can eventually develop into accountability and reinforce trust, which leads to a better teaming experience overall. And our handbook, which we are currently in the process of writing right now, provides guidance on setting up effective work and communication structures that can help create accountability and enhance trust building. And so some of the topics that are covered in our handbook are identity, psychological safety, team building, being an effective team member, and some of the collaborative affordances of technology. So to end off my presentation, if you've listened this far, thank you so much. But if you only remember something from my presentation, I'd like it to be this slide. So remember that a team is nothing without the commitment of its members, and even putting your best effort forward and a lot of heart into a project goes a long way, no matter how many recommendations and best practices we can offer you. It's really up to the team to put them into play. So my 3 tips on being a good team member. The first one is don't ghost your team members. Even a quick text saying, sorry, I'm overwhelmed right now, I can't do this until next week. It goes a long way in appeasing the stress and anxiety your team member may feel on the other end, being unable to reach you. And it's important to have conversations about expectations and contingency plans early on while being mindful of everyone's schedules. The second thing is to get to know your team. I find that this is something often overlooked in teaming. A lot of students just want to get to the work and the assignment right away and don't take the time to actually get to know your team. But this is actually an investment that's worthwhile because it leads to better communication patterns and being able to better understand one another's perspective more easily. And so one of the ways we recommend to do this is to leave room for casual talk and to play some games online. And so me and my research partner, one of our favorites is a bomb diffusing game called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. And from that, we've had to develop our own little system to communicate back and forth in order to diffuse the bomb efficiently. And the last thing is to schedule in time for you. It's hard to be a good team member without being a good and functional individual on your own first. So going into this online semester, we realized it's extremely difficult to separate your personal and student life given everything's all in the same place. And it can feel extremely invasive and overwhelming to constantly have to be on your phone and respond to messages for teamwork or other courses. And so our recommendation is simple. Schedule at least 1 hour a day just for you, whether it's to go for a walk, to cook, to listen to music, or watch your favorite TV show. It's important to take that mental break just to reset. And you should also define your boundaries early on with your team and make sure you stick to that schedule in order to be effective across the whole semester. And so while it's important to remember that teaming is a continual commitment that will last the course of the project, it's actually most important to do this in the first couple of weeks because this forms the foundation and sets the tone of the entire project that's to come. So I thank you for listening, and I'd like to thank the Engineering Instructional Innovation Program, who has been supporting our research, as well as Troost iLead. And I will now open the floor to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Julianne.
Yeah.
So right now, the judges have any questions, please raise your hand. I'll get back to you. So we have a question from Azadeh Zendier. Please go ahead.
Hi, Julianne, and
Hello.
hi, everyone. Thank you very much for your presentation. I have just one quick question regarding the survey. And like, was there any specific strategy or method that you designed the questions, the questionnaire and the survey? And if you could like a little bit elaborate on that, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. So we wanted to consider every team as a case-by-case basis. So we made sure to get some basic information on the profile of teams, looking at whether they were commuters, like the basic profile makeup of the team. So we looked at commuters, where they lived on campus, and then after everything post-transition, so looking at the time zones and where everyone lived, to get a sense of what context the teams were working with. We set most of our questions to be open-ended but targeted. So we wanted to address some things like accountability and understand how teams communicated. So we asked specific technologies that they used and how they used it, but left a lot of room for students to elaborate on some of the difficulties they had with their teams. And I'm not sure if that answers your question. I could probably find specific examples.
Sure. No, that was great. Actually, like there are other people who have questions. I believe like we can move on to the other. Thank you very much.
Thank you for asking.
Okay, we have another question from Wei Tiong NG.
Yeah, so this is Wei Tiong. Thank you for the presentation. I have a quick question. Would the data that you collect in this survey be skewed because of the special circumstance this year? Because our students started out with regular face-to-face instruction and then have to go online abruptly. So what do you think it will happen if you take this survey like this year, where everybody knows right from the beginning that we have to move mostly online?
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the things that we'd like to do in our next steps, though my summer research ends this summer, so that probably won't be me. But yeah, that's one of the things that came up and a lot in the survey. Teams were reporting that they built their dynamics and their team bonding activities around the online setting and got to know each other in person. For some teams, that preset bond allowed them to continue online and to keep working as a team. And for some students, it just disintegrated because they could no longer keep up those relational behaviors. I think setting it up online from the get-go should lead to a more consistent experience. There's still a lot of struggles in getting to know people online, since everything about the communication is so intentional and explicit. And there's no room to just casually get to know your team member in the same way that there was online when you'd be in the same room. So I'm not sure if I can answer this question. I'm very excited to see what the semester brings.
So does that mean the data that you collect is accurate, or maybe we should, take a grain of salt?
Yeah, so we're taking it with a grain of salt just because we do realize students were impacted by the big shift online. And so we actually chose to put aside some of the quotes that students talked about, where they talked about the big stress of COVID and having to move back in quarantine, because that's not something that our students in September will be facing. And so we are considering the data carefully, remembering the context that it was taken in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Julianne, for your time.